A billionaire's twin girls haven't smiled in years, their laughter lost to grief, until one unexpected act by their humble maid changes everything. Will joy finally find its way back to their hearts? Hello beautiful souls, and welcome to Ms. Love Stories channel, the place where love, drama, and unforgettable moments come alive. I'm so thrilled you're here, ready to dive into stories that will make your heart race, bring tears, and leave you believing in the power of love. Before we begin, I want to get to know all of you. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because in the next video, I'll give a special shout out to some of you amazing viewers from around the world. I can't wait to see how far our love story family reaches. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you never miss a single emotional journey. Get ready to feel, laugh, cry, and fall in love all over again. Because every story we share here is for you. Now, the story begins. Rose. Peter stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, the city lights stretching endlessly beneath him. From up here, he had everything. A sprawling empire, a life of luxury, and yet the silence was deafening. The billionaire's hands clenched around the crystal glass of whiskey, though he didn't drink. He never drank. Not since the accident. 2 years ago, laughter had filled this apartment. Soft giggles echoing down the marble halls, small hands leaving fingerprints on the glass. His twin daughters, Emma and Lily, had been inseparable, their smiles bright enough to light the darkest corners of the world. But grief had a way of stealing even the brightest lights. The girls hadn't smiled since their mother's death, and every day Peter felt the weight of their sorrow pressing against his chest. Peter was a man of control. Every business deal, every corporate maneuver, meticulously calculated. Yet here, in the quiet of his home, control slipped through his fingers. He walked over to a photo of his daughters on the piano. Lily in her pink dress, Emma holding a stuffed bear, both frozen in time, a snapshot of joy that no longer existed. "Why can't I fix this?" he muttered to himself. His voice was low, almost lost beneath the hum of the city. "I have everything, but I can't bring them back." Across town, in a small apartment with creaking floors and a kitchen that smelled faintly of garlic and old wood, Sophia hummed as she scrubbed the counter. She had never imagined herself here. Not in the billionaire's mansion, not in the world of crystal and marble, but necessity had led her here, a life shaped by sacrifices no one could understand. She had dreams, of course, fleeting moments she tucked into the corners of her heart. But now her focus was simple. Work hard, help others, survive. Sophia's eyes softened as she looked at a tattered photograph pinned above her sink. A picture of a small girl smiling, a memory she clung to from her own childhood. She remembered the joy of simple things. Chasing butterflies, the sound of a mother's laughter, the warmth of someone caring. That memory drove her now, in every choice she made. Tonight, Sophia was tired, her hands raw from scrubbing, but there was a spark she couldn't extinguish. She believed in small acts, in kindness that rippled farther than anyone could see. And she had no idea, yet, that one small act would soon ignite a chain reaction, touching hearts that had almost given up on hope. Meanwhile, Peter moved to the living room, the silence pressing in like a living thing. He tried to imagine laughter filling this space again, tried to picture his daughter's joy, but it felt like reaching for the sky. The apartment, with all its grandeur, felt like a gilded cage. He was surrounded by riches, yet he had never felt poorer. His phone buzzed. Another business call. Another deal. Another reminder that the world kept spinning while his daughters remained trapped in grief. He ignored it, staring instead at the grand piano, the instrument that had once echoed with tiny fingers pressing keys in clumsy harmony. Now it was silent. For Peter, the world had become a series of rigid lines and empty spaces. Yet somewhere, deep down, a fragile hope whispered, a hope he hadn't dared to acknowledge in years. A hope that maybe, somehow, the laughter of his daughters could return. Outside, in her apartment, Sophia tied her apron and rubbed her tired hands. She didn't know it yet, but tonight would change everything. A decision she would make, a small gesture, would become the spark Peter didn't know he was waiting for. And somewhere, just out of sight, destiny was quietly arranging their paths to collide. Speech balloon comment below. If you were Peter, how would you try to bring laughter back to your children? In the quiet corners of the mansion, Two little girls sat on the floor, huddled together like fragile birds. Emma, with her dark, thoughtful eyes, traced patterns on the carpet with a trembling finger. Lily, her twin, stared blankly at a storybook she had lost interest in long ago. The apartment that had once resonated with laughter now felt cavernous and cold. Peter watched them from the doorway, the weight of helplessness pressing on him like stones. His heart ached with every sigh they released. No lullaby, no toy, no extravagant gift could coax the sparkle back into their eyes. He had tried everything, from weekend getaways to hiring tutors, to elaborate parties. Nothing worked. Their smiles had been stolen by grief, and no amount of wealth could buy them back. "Daddy." Emma's soft voice broke the silence. It was the first word he'd heard in weeks, and it sounded like a thread stretching through a storm. He knelt beside her, careful not to startle her. "Yes, sweetheart?" he asked, forcing calm into his tone. I don't remember." Emma's voice quivered. "I don't remember how to be happy." Peter's chest tightened. He knelt there, holding both girls' small hands, feeling the fragility of their childhood pressing against him. The rich, commanding man from the boardroom vanished in that instant, replaced by a father desperate to heal the broken hearts before him. But as he looked at them, Peter knew that sheer willpower alone would not work. Their smiles were not something he could buy or command. They had to come from within. And as he traced the curve of Lily's cheek with his thumb, he silently vowed he would find a way, no matter how long it took. Meanwhile, Sophia had finished her night shift at the small boutique she worked at. Exhausted but content. Her thoughts wandered, as they often did, to helping others. She didn't know the mansion she would soon enter, the lives she would touch, or the children whose laughter had been silenced. But she carried within her a quiet belief that even the smallest acts, kindness, patience, a gentle smile, could ignite change. She adjusted her apron as she walked home through the dimly lit streets, thinking about the stories she had heard about the mansion. The rumors spoke of a man who had everything yet was as lonely as a shadow, and two girls whose laughter had disappeared like morning mist. Sophia didn't know if the stories were true, but she felt an inexplicable pull, a whisper in her heart that maybe, just maybe, she could help. Back in the mansion, Peter rose from the carpet, exhausted. The silence returned as he left the room, but something lingered, a faint thread of hope, fragile as glass, but unbroken. He glanced at the piano, at the photograph of the girl's mother, and then at the clock ticking relentlessly toward midnight. He knew that whatever it would take, he could not allow his daughters to remain trapped in this quiet despair. Across town, Sophia paused in front of her window, looking at the city skyline glittering like distant stars. She didn't yet know that tomorrow she would step into a world that seemed unapproachable, a place of wealth and sorrow combined, where her presence would become a lifeline for two children, and a man who had lost more than just smiles. It was in these quiet, separate moments, the hush of grief in the mansion and the soft resolve in a humble apartment, that the threads of fate began to weave together. The lives of Peter, Sophia, and the twin girls were moving toward a collision that neither wealth nor sorrow could prevent. And somewhere, deep in the stillness of the night, the first seed of change was planted, small, almost imperceptible, but powerful enough to grow into something that could mend broken hearts. Speech balloon comment below. If you could bring back the laughter of a child, what small act would you try first? The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the mansion, cutting across the polished floors in golden slivers. The mansion, despite its grandeur, felt cold, too sterile, too empty. Peter sat at the breakfast table, his mind elsewhere, watching as his daughters pushed their food around their plates, silent, almost ghost-like. He had tried every method, games, toys, even hiring therapists, but nothing reached them. Emma's tiny hands fidgeted with her fork. Lily's gaze was fixed on the floor. The room was filled with silence, heavy and suffocating. For a man accustomed to control, this helplessness was unbearable. Peter sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't know what else to do," he muttered, though the words were meant for no one. He felt the pressure of a father's failure pressing down, a shame he could neither escape nor confront. At that moment, the door opened softly. Sophia stepped in, carrying a basket of fresh flowers she had picked herself, daisies bright and cheerful, their scent warm and inviting. She had been recommended by a friend as someone gentle with children, though Peter had been skeptical. Wealthy, powerful men often saw the world in transactions, not emotions. Yet there she was, unassuming and calm, entering their lives like a small ray of sunlight piercing through clouds. "Good morning," Sophia said softly, her voice lilting like a gentle melody. She knelt to set the flowers on the table, careful not to startle the girls. "I thought these might brighten your morning." Emma's eyes flickered briefly toward the flowers, a faint curiosity softening her rigid posture. Lily, for once, let her hand brush against the petals, as if testing whether something this delicate could exist in their harsh, grief-filled world. Peter watched silently, unsure whether to interfere. He had learned that forced cheer could feel patronizing. Perhaps this was different. Something about Sophia's calm presence, her gentle attention to the girls, felt like a lifeline. Then Sophia did something small but extraordinary. She sat cross-legged on the floor, tilting her head slightly, and began to hum a soft tune. It wasn't perfect, and she didn't even know the words, but her tone was warm, comforting, and honest. The hum floated through the room, wrapping around the girls like a soft blanket. Emma's eyes widened slightly. She looked at her sister, and Lily mirrored the expression, as if sharing an unspoken question. "Can joy still exist?" Sophia continued, her voice steady but tender. She reached into the basket and picked a single daisy, holding it up between her fingers. "This is for you," she whispered, offering it to Emma. Emma hesitated, then accepted it, clutching it tightly like a fragile treasure. Lily's lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile, as Sophia placed another flower in her hand. Peter felt a lump rise in his throat. He had witnessed countless business deals, negotiations, and successes, but nothing had ever struck him like this moment. Two small smiles, fragile yet real, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, filled the room. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it was there. For the first time in years, Peter's heart felt a tremor of hope. It was a spark, delicate but undeniable, and he knew he had to nurture it. His daughters, trapped in grief, had begun to feel joy again, not through wealth, not through commands or grand gestures, but through genuine human connection. Sophia, in her simple, unassuming way, had begun to mend what had been broken. The room seemed warmer now. The sound of soft humming, the subtle laughter that followed when Lily tried to repeat the tune, and Emma's shy giggle formed a melody Peter hadn't thought possible again. He swallowed hard, realizing that perhaps this was the start of something far greater than he had imagined. A love and healing that no amount of money could buy. Sophia glanced at Peter briefly, her eyes warm but cautious, aware that trust and connection couldn't be rushed. Peter returned the look, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. For the first time, there was potential for hope, for unity, for unexpected joy. That small, seemingly insignificant morning became the turning point. The spark had ignited, and none of them, Peter, Sophia, or the twin girls, would ever be the same again. Speech balloon comment below. Have you ever seen a small act completely change someone's day? What would you do in Peter's place? The next morning, the mansion felt colder than before, despite the sun spilling through the windows. The twin girls had retreated to the far corners of the living room, hugging their favorite stuffed animals as though those soft toys could shield them from the world. Peter sat at the breakfast table, untouched food in front of him, staring at Sophia as she gently arranged the flowers from yesterday in a vase. A part of him wanted to reach out, to thank her for the subtle miracle she had started, but pride, stubbornness, and fear of vulnerability held him back. How could he admit that someone else had begun to reach the heart he thought he alone could protect? "Good morning," Sophia said softly, noticing Peter's gaze but not letting herself falter. She walked toward the girls, who only barely acknowledged her presence. She knelt down, her voice gentle, but firm. "Would you like to help me make breakfast today?" Emma shook her head, hugging her knees. Lily looked at her sister for guidance, and mirrored her refusal. The girl's silence felt heavier than ever. Sophia's hands tightened around the edge of the counter for a moment. She was used to obstacles, to skepticism, but this resistance was different. It wasn't defiance born of mischief. It was fear, grief, and mistrust layered together like armor. Peter cleared his throat, stepping forward, his voice unsteady. Maybe we should give them some space," he said, though every instinct in him screamed to reach out. to break through the wall their grief had built. He watched as Sophia's shoulders slumped slightly, her optimism colliding with reality. Yet Sophia did not give up. She retreated to the kitchen, quietly preparing a tray with milk and toast. She left it on the girls' small table, arranging it in neat little portions, her presence unobtrusive but caring. The girls didn't touch it. The untouched breakfast became a silent battleground of wills and emotions, a quiet tension hanging in the air. Peter wandered the mansion, moving from room to room, unable to focus on the boardroom calls waiting on his phone. Even wealth and power couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness that had nested inside him. The girl's lack of response wasn't just stubbornness. It was grief, raw and unyielding, and it reminded him of every failure he felt as a father. He returned to the living room, standing just behind the girls, unsure whether to kneel, speak, or simply remain silent. The twin girls sensed the tension, the mixture of hope and frustration radiating from him, and retreated further into their shells. The mansion's grand walls, polished and sparkling, felt more like a prison than a home. Sophia, meanwhile, quietly wiped down the counters, her mind racing. Could one small act really change something so broken? She questioned her ability to reach the girls, but a quiet voice inside told her not to abandon them. Sometimes resistance was just the first test of trust. Hours passed. The girls remained silent. Peter sat in the armchair, staring at the untouched flowers on the table. It was a painful reminder that hope could flicker, yet the darkness of grief could quickly snuff it out. For a moment, he questioned whether he was just prolonging their pain, whether his desire to fix their smiles was selfish. But then Lily whispered something small, barely audible. "I like the flowers." Sophia froze, her hands hovering over the dishes. Peter's eyes darted toward the girls. A fragile, tremulous smile appeared on Emma's face as she added, "They're pretty." It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. A crack in the wall, a glimmer of connection. The girls were still resistant, still testing their boundaries, but the spark Sophia had ignited was refusing to die. Peter felt a surge of hope, though tempered with caution. Change would not come easily. Grief, after all, was patient. Sophia's quiet determination, Peter's protective vigilance, and the girls' hesitant curiosity formed a tense equilibrium. The room was still filled with resistance, but beneath it, a fragile bond was starting to grow. This was the first real test. Would they allow themselves to embrace change, or would fear and grief drive them back into silence? Speech balloon comment below. Have you ever faced resistance while trying to help someone you love? How did you push through? The next day dawned gray and drizzly. Rain streaked the windows of the mansion, tapping a gentle rhythm against the glass. Normally, the girls would hide away in their rooms, retreating from the world. But today, a power outage forced the household into a temporary stillness. Lights flickered off mid-breakfast, plunging the mansion into dim shadows. The elevator halted, and the sprawling home, usually divided by floors and corridors, suddenly felt smaller, closer, unavoidable. Peter checked the fuse box in the basement, muttering under his breath. The girls, frightened by the sudden darkness, clutched each other. Sophia knelt beside them, keeping her voice calm. "It's okay, it's just the storm. Let's stay together until the lights come back." No one had a choice. The vast mansion, normally a maze of separation, now felt intimate, pressing, and unavoidable. Peter, the girls, and Sophia found themselves confined to the cozy sitting room by the fireplace, the only warmth and light in the house. At first, tension filled the air. The girls were suspicious of the darkness and each other's reactions. Peter paced nervously, unsure of how to bridge the gap between them. Sophia stayed near the girls, her presence a silent comfort, but careful not to push. Minutes stretched into an hour. Slowly, Peter sat down on the rug opposite the girls, trying to appear calm, despite the pounding of his heart. Sophia handed them blankets and offered hot cocoa she had managed to heat on the small emergency stove. The girls accepted it reluctantly, still watching her with wide, cautious eyes. Then something extraordinary happened. Peter, wanting to distract them, began telling a story. A ridiculous, over-the-top story of a clumsy billionaire who tried to ride a horse across his office. He stumbled over words, exaggerated every detail, and for the first time in what felt like years, The girls giggled. Lily snorted into her cocoa, and Emma's shoulders shook with suppressed laughter. Sophia's eyes sparkled. "See? You're smiling," she said softly, her voice steady. "You can laugh even when it feels impossible." Peter felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. The girls' laughter was small, hesitant, but it rang through the room, soft and fragile like a glass chime. The storm outside still raged, but inside, for a brief moment, everything felt safe. Hours passed, the storm finally easing, but the bond formed in those tight quarters lingered. The girls leaned closer to Sophia, clinging to her presence like a lifeline. Peter watched quietly, a quiet humility settling over him. The mansion's walls, once imposing and isolating, now seemed less like barriers and more like witnesses to something delicate forming: trust. In that small, forced proximity, they discovered the beginnings of connection. They had no choice but to interact, to comfort each other, to share warmth in the dark. And in that shared vulnerability, Peter began to see Sophia not just as a caretaker, but as someone who could heal, guide, and perhaps even love. Not only his daughters but the broken pieces of his own heart. By the time the lights returned, the atmosphere had shifted. The girls' smiles, though fleeting, were more confident. Peter's posture, previously rigid, softened. Sophia's calm determination had woven them together, forcing an emotional closeness they had been avoiding. The mansion, for the first time, felt like a home. Have you ever been forced into a situation that unexpectedly brought you closer to someone? How did it change you? The next morning, sunlight poured into the mansion, brushing across the polished floors and warm rugs. The twins, now more comfortable with Sophia's presence, sat quietly on the rug, playing with building blocks. Peter lingered nearby, sipping coffee, his mind elsewhere. Sophia, noticing his distant expression, asked softly, "Peter, what happened to your wife?" The question hung in the air, delicate and heavy. Peter's gaze dropped to the cup in his hands. His jaw tightened. He hadn't spoken about it in months, not even to himself. The grief, raw and unrelenting, had been bottled away, hidden behind walls of control and responsibility. She died in an accident, Peter admitted finally, his voice breaking slightly. "A car, on her way home from a hospital visit. I wasn't there. I couldn't protect her." Sophia knelt beside him, not speaking, just listening. There was nothing to say. Sometimes silence carried more comfort than words ever could. Peter's eyes darkened as he thought of the twins. The girls, they blame me in a way. Maybe not with words, but in their hearts. "I've tried everything, therapists, tutors, toys, parties, but nothing brings back their smiles." His voice shook. "I feel like a failure. Not just as a father, but as a husband, as a man, as someone who was supposed to protect them." Sophia's chest tightened. She didn't flinch. "Peter, none of that is your fault. You love them. That counts for more than anything else. They just need time, and someone who believes in their laughter again." Peter's eyes softened, though doubt still lingered. "I don't know if anyone can fix this," he murmured. Meanwhile, the twins continued playing, but their attention drifted toward the conversation. Lily's tiny hand reached for Emma's, a quiet attempt to anchor herself in familiarity. Emma glanced up, her expression conflicted. Curiosity and grief tangled together. Sophia gently guided the conversation, careful to tread lightly. Sometimes, children carry the weight of what happened, even if they don't understand it fully. That's why it's so important to feel safe, to feel that it's okay to laugh again. Emma's voice, tentative and small, broke the silence. I remember Mommy singing. She laughed a lot. But then the accident, everything stopped." Peter's throat tightened. He had tried to suppress these memories, tried to shield himself from the raw pain, but now, hearing Emma voice it aloud, the floodgates opened. He sank to the floor beside them, wrapping the girls in a protective embrace. I'm so sorry. I wish I could bring her back. I wish I could fix this for all of us." The twins clung to him, letting their grief intermingle with the fragile thread of hope Sophia had started. The mansion seemed to breathe along with them, the walls absorbing sorrow, then exhaling it with their tentative smiles. Later that day, Sophia stumbled upon a small, hidden photograph tucked inside a drawer in the twins' room. It was a picture of the girl's mother holding them as babies, all three faces radiant with joy. Sophia felt a pang of sadness and understanding. She realized that part of what kept the twins from smiling was not only grief for their mother, but the absence of someone who could gently guide them back toward joy. Peter, watching Sophia quietly examining the photograph, realized something too. He didn't have to carry the burden alone. Help could come from the most unexpected place. Perhaps, just perhaps, someone outside their grief, someone patient, compassionate, and gentle, could help him guide his daughters back to happiness. By the end of the day, the mansion felt different. The laughter had not fully returned, but cracks in the wall of sorrow were forming. Peter's defenses were down. Sophia's presence had started to weave into their lives meaningfully, and the twins had begun to sense that smiling again was not forbidden, not impossible. Speech balloon comment below. Have you ever had a moment when understanding someone's past changed the way you felt about them? How did it impact your relationship? Evening had settled over the mansion, and the golden glow of the lamps cast soft warmth across the living room. The rain from the previous day had left the city streets glistening, but inside, the mansion felt like a cocoon, safe, intimate, alive with possibility. Peter sat on the rug with the girls, watching as Sophia poured hot chocolate into mismatched cups, a small smile tugging at her lips. For the first time in months, the girls were laughing, not shy, hesitant smiles, but real giggles that bounced off the walls. Emma had spilled a little cocoa on Lily's sleeve, and instead of retreating, Lily had burst into laughter, smearing her cup in the process. Sophia laughed along, light and carefree, and even Peter chuckled quietly, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years. This is chaos, Sophia teased gently, wiping Lily's sleeve. But maybe a little chaos is exactly what we need. Peter shook his head, smiling despite himself. I forgot what this feels like, to just enjoy the moment. The girls looked at him, their eyes softening. Lily handed him her cup, her small fingers brushing against his. Daddy, you can spill cocoa too, she said, giggling. Peter's heart clenched. I don't think I'd be very good at it, he replied, but the warmth in his voice mirrored the warmth in his heart. Sophia caught his glance and nodded subtly, a silent acknowledgement that the bond forming here was fragile, yet real. Later, the three of them settled around the fireplace. Sophia began telling stories from her own childhood, stories of small triumphs, silly mistakes, and moments of kindness. The girls listened wide-eyed, captivated not just by the tales but by the way Sophia told them, with humor, patience, and empathy. Emma tentatively shared a memory of her mother singing in the garden, and Peter joined in, recounting his own recollections of their mother's laughter, the little quirks he had loved but had almost forgotten. The room hummed with a newfound intimacy. For the first time, grief wasn't the only force shaping the space. They were weaving threads of trust, joy, and shared vulnerability. At one point, Emma leaned against Sophia, resting her small head on her shoulder. Lily curled up next to Peter, hiding her face in his chest. The adults exchanged a glance, silent but full of understanding. The children were beginning to trust them, to believe that laughter and love were not gone forever. Sophia quietly excused herself to fetch a blanket, and Peter took the moment to kneel beside the girls. I promise you, he said softly, we're going to find joy again together. His hands held theirs firmly, conveying the gravity of his words. Lily looked up, eyes shimmering. Do you really mean that? Peter nodded, a tear threatening to fall. Every word. The evening stretched into night. The fireplace crackled, shadows dancing across the walls, but within the mansion, warmth and laughter prevailed. Even in the smallest gestures, pouring cocoa, telling stories, holding hands, the family found pieces of themselves again. Sophia had become more than a maid. She was a guide, a bridge, and a steady presence in the healing of both father and daughters. By the time bedtime arrived, the girls were exhausted but happy. Peter tucked them in, brushing stray hair from their faces, while Sophia lingered nearby, watching the scene with a quiet smile. For the first time, the mansion felt less like a prison of grief and more like a home, alive with connection, hope, and the promise of healing. In the stillness of the night, Peter and Sophia exchanged a look that carried unspoken understanding. The bond forming between them, and with the girls, was deep, fragile, and transformative. The path ahead would have obstacles, heartbreaks, and resistance, but tonight had proven something essential. Love, patience, and presence could spark joy even in the darkest corners. Speech balloon comment below. Have you ever shared a small moment that suddenly brought you closer to someone? What was it? The morning sun struggled through thick clouds, casting the mansion in a dim, uneasy light. Peter had returned from a meeting earlier than expected, his mind preoccupied with urgent business matters, when he noticed the twins' laughter echoing through the hallway. Normally, he would have felt relief, but today unease settled over him. He found Sophia and the girls in the sunroom. Sophia was showing the twins a small collection of hand-painted figurines she had brought, telling stories to accompany each one. The girls were laughing, their smiles brighter than ever in weeks. Peter's initial relief twisted into suspicion. Where did you get these? Peter asked sharply, his voice carrying across the room. Sophia froze, startled. I painted them myself, she said softly, trying to maintain calm. Peter's brow furrowed. You went out and bought things for them? His voice wavered between anger and worry. Do you understand what you're doing? They're fragile. You can't just. I didn't buy anything, Sophia interrupted gently, standing up. I made them, Peter. I'm not here to spoil them. I'm here to help them heal. The girls watched silently, sensing the tension rising. Emma clutched her favorite doll tighter, while Lily hid her face against Sophia's side. Peter's protective instincts collided with his fear of being powerless over their emotions. You don't understand, he snapped, his voice louder than intended. I can't let anyone interfere with them. Not even someone I trust. The words sounded harsher than he intended, laden with guilt, frustration, and fear. Sophia's face fell. She had never expected gratitude to be so fragile, nor understanding to crumble so easily. Peter, she whispered, hurt in her voice. I'm trying to help. I'm not trying to replace anyone or take control. I care about them, and I care about you. But Peter, blinded by worry and the fear of losing control over the girl's emotional recovery, stepped back. You don't get it, he muttered, shaking his head. I can't risk them being hurt again, or worse, me being wrong about you. With that, he turned sharply and walked away, leaving Sophia standing in the sunroom, the girls' giggles fading into awkward silence. The fragile bond they had built only hours before was shattered, replaced by tension, doubt, and confusion. The girls, sensing the emotional rupture, withdrew further into themselves. Lily's small shoulders shook as she whispered, Daddy, is she leaving? Peter paused at the top of the stairs, his chest tightening. He had intended to protect them, to shield them from further hurt. Yet all he had done was drive a wedge between them and the one person trying to bring joy into their lives. Sophia remained in the sunroom, tears glimmering in her eyes, though she did not cry openly. She had seen this coming, perhaps, but the blow still cut deep. Her care and patience, her gentle attempts to heal their broken hearts, now hung in the air, seemingly rejected. Hours later, Peter sat in his study, alone, staring at the city skyline. The mansion was eerily quiet. The girls were silent, Sophia had retreated, and a gnawing ache of regret filled him. He realized that in his attempt to control, he had pushed away the one person who could truly help him and his daughters. Meanwhile, Sophia, back in her small apartment, wrapped herself in a blanket and stared at the simple photograph of the girl she had taken earlier. A memory of laughter now tinged with pain. She questioned whether she could continue, whether her presence could ever make a difference, but deep inside, she knew she could not abandon them. The day had ended in silence, mistrust, and heartbreak. Peter, Sophia, and the girls were left to wrestle with their choices, their pride, and their grief. The mansion, once a place of growing connection, now felt cold and empty, a stark reminder of how fragile love and trust could be. This was the lowest point, the emotional chasm that would test whether hope, patience, and vulnerability could overcome pride, fear, and grief. Speech balloon comment below. Have you ever pushed someone away out of fear or protectiveness, only to regret it later? How did you reconcile? The mansion was silent, almost oppressive. Evening had fallen, and the golden light of the sunset filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Peter sat alone in the study, hands clasped over his head, staring at the family photos on the wall. The twins' frozen smiles, their mother's laughter captured in a moment he could never reclaim. He thought of Sophia. He thought of the warmth she had brought, the small but profound ways she had begun to heal the family. And yet his pride, his fear, his stubborn need to control, had driven her away. The realization gnawed at him like fire. Peter closed his eyes. I can't lose this. Not again. I can't let my fear destroy what little hope we've found. Meanwhile, Sophia sat in her apartment, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the photographs of the twins' smiles she had captured over the last few days. Her heart ached, not just for the girls, but for the family she had begun to love. She questioned herself. Did I overstep? Did I make a mistake trying to help them? But then she remembered Lily's laugh and Emma's small tentative smile. She remembered the warmth in Peter's eyes before he let fear get the better of him. I can't abandon them now. Not when they need me most. The clock ticked slowly, marking the weight of their indecision. The mansion was quiet, yet every room seemed to pulse with unspoken longing. Peter finally rose from his chair, resolve hardening within him. He could no longer remain paralyzed by fear. He would go to Sophia. He would acknowledge his mistake, lay down his pride, and ask for her forgiveness. The emotional cost was high. Admitting vulnerability always is, but the potential reward, the reunion and healing of his family, was higher. At the same time, Sophia rose from her apartment, unsure if Peter wanted her to return, but her heart would not let her hesitate. She would go, trusting that he truly wanted the same as she did. Laughter, joy, and love restored in the hearts of the twins. They met in the foyer of the mansion, the air heavy with anticipation and unspoken words. Peter stepped forward first, his voice low but steady. Sophia, I was wrong. I let my fear and pride get in the way. Please. I need you. Not just for the girls, but for me too. Sophia's eyes glistened with tears. Peter, I never stopped caring. I never wanted to replace anyone, only to help to heal. I'm here. For you and for them. Always. The tension between them eased, replaced by something fragile but real. They walked together toward the sunroom, where the twins were curled up quietly. Peter took a deep breath and spoke softly to them. Girls, I made a mistake. I was afraid, and I hurt someone who only wanted to help us. I hope you can forgive me too. Emma and Lily exchanged glances, their expressions tentative, then slowly, almost imperceptibly, they nodded. Sophia knelt beside them, gently holding their hands. Peter sat close, brushing Lily's hair from her face. The room was quiet, yet full of potential. It was a moment of choice for everyone. Pride, fear, and past hurts were still present, but they were outweighed by vulnerability, honesty, and the desire to reconnect. Peter and Sophia had chosen to trust each other. The twins had chosen to let themselves hope again. For the first time in what felt like forever, the mansion felt alive. Not with wealth nor grandness, but with connection, forgiveness, and the tentative stirrings of love restored. Speech balloon comment below. Have you ever had to swallow your pride to fix a relationship? How did it feel to take that leap? Morning arrived with a gentle glow, sunlight spilling across the mansion's polished floors. For the first time in weeks, the atmosphere felt light, warm, welcoming, and alive. Peter stood in the sunroom, watching as Sophia guided Emma and Lily through a simple art activity, their small hands painting bright colors on paper. The twins' laughter floated through the air like music, unrestrained and free. Peter's heart swelled. The same fragile smiles that had been a spark weeks ago now radiated with confidence. He knelt beside them, brushing a streak of blue paint from Lily's cheek. You two look amazing, he said softly, his voice filled with awe and affection. Sophia smiled at him, her presence calm and steady. They're healing, she said quietly, almost to herself. And so are you. Peter shook his head, a tear sliding down his cheek. No, we all are. Because of you. Emma, holding her finished painting, looked up and handed it to Sophia. Thank you for helping us smile again, she said, her words sincere and heartfelt. Lily nodded, echoing the sentiment with a shy but real smile. The moment was simple yet profound. Laughter, trust, and love had returned to the mansion. Not as fleeting moments, but as living, breathing parts of their daily lives. The girls had reclaimed their childhood. Peter had rediscovered his vulnerability and capacity for connection. and Sophia had found the reward of patience and care. The transformation of a broken family. Later, the family gathered for breakfast, the table filled not just with food but with warmth, conversation, and gentle teasing. Peter poured cocoa for the girls, who were already giggling over a small mishap involving spilled milk. Sophia laughed along, brushing off the minor chaos with humor and kindness. Peter caught Sophia's gaze across the table. No words were needed. The understanding was complete. They had faced fear, pride, and grief, and together, they had emerged stronger, closer, and unbreakable. After breakfast, Peter took the twins outside into the garden. Sunlight sparkled on the dewy grass, and the girls ran freely, laughter echoing across the yard. For the first time, Peter felt lighter, unburdened, and whole. Sophia watched from the porch, smiling content. The mansion, once a house of grief, now breathed with joy and life. Later that day, Peter and Sophia sat together, sharing a quiet moment. "I never thought this would be possible," Peter admitted, holding her hand gently. "To find love again, and to see them smile like this." Sophia squeezed his hand. "Love has a way of finding you, Peter. Sometimes in the smallest, most unexpected ways." As the sun began to set, painting the sky with warm hues, the twins ran toward them, calling out in unrestrained joy. Peter scooped them up into a hug, Sophia joining in. The family, whole and connected, stood together, laughter echoing through the mansion. The same laughter that had seemed lost forever. Peter watched Sophia and the girls, his heart full. He realized that the wealth he had accumulated over the years meant nothing compared to this. Trust, love, and connection. For the first time, he understood what it truly meant to be rich, not in possessions but in the bonds of family. And in that perfect moment, Peter knew one undeniable truth. Love at last, unexpected and profound, had found its way into their lives. The mansion, once a place of sorrow and isolation, was now alive with warmth, laughter, and the promise of a brighter, shared future. Speech balloon comment below. What part of Peter, Sophia, and the twins' journey touched your heart the most? Could a small act of kindness change a life like theirs? Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. Your time, your support, and your presence here mean more than words can say. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or kept you watching, please make sure to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay blessed, stay strong, and keep believing in love. See you in the next story.